Now, since my first episode of my video journey, I'd like to say thank you for those of you who've kindly commented on it, and I'm very grateful to your support, the words of encouragement. Little message to my brother: I am going to get on with some work now the workshop is a little tidier. But since that last one was filmed, I've been doing quite a bit of other things to get the workshop up and going. You may have noticed me putting this little ramp out. There are sometimes this shed just isn't big enough to do the work. For example, those lengths of cherry that I've been machining, 2.4 meters long. That means I need something at least 5 meters in length just to work. I had to bring the planer thicknesser out onto the yard, and this was the only way I could do it. So things are working well. I'd like to say thank you too for your comments. One or two of you noticed the record extraction unit. I found this a very cost-effective way of caring for dust extraction. It's a powerful unit, and the outlet is 100 millimeters, so it can cope with virtually anything. I'm not going to be putting a lot of strain on it, but you'll have noticed that I have the pipe work. I converted all of the existing 63mm pipe work into the 100 when I got the thicknesser planer, thinking I'd upgrade, and one or two comments were that maybe that's a little over-engineered. Maybe, I'll see. It might get converted back into a 63mm for part of its length. I'm very pleased with the record power units, the extraction and the thicknesser, and hopefully they'll give me many years of good use. Now, one thing I wanted to say about the dust extraction: it's a manual switch. I don't seem to have the need for it to come on automatically when I put power tools on, but the only thing that you'll have inside, there's one bag and an extra dust extraction filter. The only difficult thing with it, there is no internal bag, so that is the container. I could separate that joint and tip it out into a separate bag. I tend to just get a small dustpan and scoop it out. It seems to do the job. So, in answer to my brother, when am I going to get some work done, that starts now. It's a small deviation from the project I was going to be doing, but this is so that my wife can have her computer tablet stood upright so that nobody's looking up her nose when she's looking at the machine on Zoom. So what I'm going to do, I've already got some sapele that is part of a block that I cut down some time ago. That's a nice width for the base. I've got some sapele that is roughly the right size. All it needs doing is just smoothing off slightly, and those are going to be for the upright supports. You might not be able to see that, but if you can't see it, I'll put a good picture up on the screen for you. I've roughed out the plan, the rough sizes, So I'm just going to make a quick cut or two here or there. And I just thought I'd show you something I thought about earlier. This is the new bandsaw, the Axminster. Now the drive belt has two settings. At the moment this is how it came, on the low speed. Really I want it on the high speed setting. So all I'm going to have to do is loosen the motor, which is round the back. I'll show you that in a minute. Once the motor is loosed, I can move the belt, tighten the motor up again, and then we're okay for a higher speed cut. So here's the motor, and this is the locking nut. So we just undo that and loosen the tension. Now we can go back to the drive belt and swap it over. So you now see the drive belt is very slack. All I need to do is move it over onto the rear . And then tighten the motor up again. So the first thing I want to do, I've roughly cut this down to size. I'm just going to make the cut to actually make it the size I want. Just lower the blade guides so that they're roughly where I want it, and then make the cut. And on a very fast speed, that's not a bad cut at all. The remnant of the long piece, that's going to be fine. That will do fine for the length. I think I better just cut that blue off. And because this is rounded off corners on both sides, I only want one of those rounded, so I'm just going to, using the fence, take one of these corners out. And when that's recessed in there, that will make a lovely rear for the laptop. I'm going to be putting 2 channels in here with, they're about 9mm thick, so I'm going to be using a 9mm router cutter. So with the project that we've got on at the moment, it's an opportunity for me to just highlight the new Record Power planer thicknesser. It's a lovely machine and very quick, gives a very good finish, and you'll notice I've got it attached with the 100mm outlet for the ventilation. Now, I'm not going to be using the thicknesser today. The work that I have, I can do right on top with the planer. Now you'll notice that's the adjusting knob for the infeed table, and if I can zoom in, just here you've got your depth gauge. So at the moment it's set to take off 0.5 mm at a time, which is fine for what I want to do. Now the fence is very good, but it always pays just to make sure that everything is square, because I have moved it this afternoon and it just needs to come out slightly at the top. And that is nice and square. Now, because I'm going to be using very thin stock, this at the moment is about 8mm thick. I'm going to take it down to about 7, but because it's thin, I am very definitely going to be using my push stick. That has given me a very nice finish. I don't need to do the edges of this because it's already very smooth. It's cleaned up the back of the piece very nicely, and it's left a nice finish on that cut edge as well. Of course, these are the challenges of a small workshop, putting everything back so I can move around. Now, because I'm going to be using a router cutter for the base, remember I'm going to put 2 channels in here. The best way to do that is on the table using the fence. Now, this is a hybrid fence. The base is what I bought from Axminster quite a few years ago. Independent movement of each side, which was fine. They both had their wooden cover, but I did find it very difficult to manoeuvre with and to get aligned properly. So what I've done, it's an old piece of oak faced MDF that I had that I've attached. I've made the rear compartment for dust extraction, and all I've got to do now is attach it to the bench. I can find the holes in the retaining bar. There we go, that's got those. So just tighten them up loosely. There we go. Now, what I do is use a pair of these Trend T11 routers. That one for for freehand work, and then one that's permanently attached under the desk for work with the fence. Now, this is the selection of router cutters that I have. Quite a mixture. Some of them, like this, go back many years when I first started woodworking with routers. A small 1/4 inch shank for a fancy profile. But most of them, since I've gone on to using the Trend T11, they are 1/2 inch shanks, like this 25mm, lovely for rabbetting, gets a lot of use. Some of the panel raising, that's a new acquisition for the next project along the line, and what I'm going to be using today, the rear upright that you saw me planing, that's actually come down to 12mm, so I'm going to be using that one. And the front visor, that's 7mm, so that's going to be that one. And I keep them nicely oiled, so, and there's plenty of silica gel to keep them nice and dry. So just fitting the 12mm into the router. It's a little bit of a contortion act because of, I'll show you on the freehand version, the locking mechanism is that there that locks into a hole on the spindle like that, and then I've got to manoeuvre the spanner. Again, that's an 8mm that I'm keeping in there for the next project. So under the bench, find the nut. Hand tighten the collar and then get the springs to work. Never over tighten, otherwise you'll run into problems. Put the dust guard back in. Now, one thing attracted me to the T11 is the raising mechanism. The fine adjustment is done using this knob here. So of course, when it's under the bench, there's another one just there, and so here, that's where the lifting mechanism is located. And so all I've got to do now is adjust the height to half the depth of this. Now the depth of this is 13.5mm, so 6mm should be ample. So what I want is some sort of guide to show me where the top is. And you'll notice here that the router cutter is roughly where I want it. I'll be cutting from this top side, so it will be going through the router like that, and that's going to give me a lovely depth to the cut, but plenty of room so I don't make the end too thin. So the next thing I've got to do is I've positioned the cutter for the height. I've worked out where this cutter needs to go, so those are the two edge marks. All I've got to do now is position the fence, and I do that. I can't push it any further back, So make sure that that is nice and tight and that won't move. And then at the back here I have two knobs that move both sides of the fence. So it's just a matter of, as I say, making sure that's nice and tight so that the body of the fence won't move. Constant checking as to whether it's back far enough. This is another of the little niggles I have with this fence body, but we learn to live with it. And I think this is going to be about at its limit. It's not too bad. So what I think I might do is just leave it at that position in its furthest back position. And if anybody's got any suggestions about how I can adjust this and alter it so that it gives me further back movement, I'm always willing to accept your suggestions. But I can live with that. It's about 10mm too far to the front, but I can cope with that. Now, one thing I'm going to do as well, I've got a set of Rutland's featherboards that are specifically designed for the 1/2 inch track, and that's going to make sure that the work stays down on the deck and the cutter doesn't push the whole workpiece up. So now we're about to make the cut. Make sure the power's on. Of course, you noticed my deliberate mistake. I hadn't switched the machine off. I'd only switched it off at the power. So, a nice groove, and that's a nice fit. That will glue up nicely. So all I've got to do now is do the same thing for the 7mm cutter for the other. Now I've put the 7mm cutter in, but because I want the cut to look identical, the easiest way to do that is to position that cut over the cutter and just raise it until it's the same depth. There we go. So the depth's correct. Now I've got to decide where I'm putting this. Now the computer device, it needs to be about a 30mm separation. So that's the backboard, 30mm. This cut needs to be somewhere like that, and to be honest I might be struggling at that. I might have to find some other way to use the cutter, because where's the pencil? If I want 30mm there, which is there, this edge needs to be 30mm, but I'm going to struggle to get it to that point. I can't get it to go any further back. So what I might have to do is have one piece like that and literally glue a second piece onto the face to make it a slightly wider board, because what I really want to do is use the wood that I've got available. I don't really want to start dimensioning other timber too much. So I'll see how that goes. I'll see in theory what the work's like, and then we'll take that from there. Now, one thing I've decided to do, I'm not going to make that double thickness. What I've decided to do, I'm going to take the fence off, but I'm going to use this piece of extruded aluminium and use it as a fence here, so that the workpiece will move against this face here, and I've got plenty of lockdown so I can use the T-tracks to hold this in place. Now, as you can see, I've made a suitable alteration, putting 2 holes in there. That will securely clamp it to the T-bar. So I now can put this where I want it, and that cut will be very, very secure. All I have to be careful of now, when I'm using a push stick, I've got to be careful that the workpiece doesn't push up, because I don't now have any featherboard to keep it pushed down, and because I'm working from the wrong side, I need to keep my hand out of the way. So what I think I might do is move that to there. And of course, one thing I need to make sure that this is going to produce a parallel cut, a straight cut, so that it's running parallel to that. Little bits of aluminium from drilling those 2 holes. So what I've got to make sure that this piece is still giving me a 30mm position. I've marked it at both ends. There we go. One final check. That's fine. So all I've got to do now is make sure my fingers keep out of the way, but I keep some firm pressure on there. And that was just me making sure the vacuum is connected. That's nice and even for the depth of cut. That's an even 30mm for the width. So we're all ready to go. Now one thing I've realised I've done, that last cut I've taken it all across. I wasn't intending to do that. I was intending it just to stop there so that I can get the edge of the device on both sides, but the full depth of the screen could be seen. I've taken that all the way across, so what I will have to do is, so that that doesn't look funny, I'm going to have to cut a section out of that so that it doesn't impinge on the edge of the screen, but that's for another day. Last thing to do now, the two cutters I've used, I always clean those. And I use Axminster blade and bit cleaner. You can see by the bottle, I've had this for quite some time. I've got another bottle up there for when this gives out. So quick squirt, let it soak. Wipe it off with a dry cloth. Now the nice thing about sapele, it doesn't tend to stick. There's not a lot of resin in this particular wood. I've had it quite some time and it was prepared stock for a commercial operation before I ended up with it. So there's very little moisture in it, so the fact that there's very little sticking to the bit makes it very easy. make sure, because it's water based, it's a soap solution, make sure that everything is nice and dry. Just to make sure everything's nice and dry, a quick squirt of WD-40 for water dispellent. Dry that off again. And then finish the job off with some 3-in-1 oil, just to lightly cover the bare metal surfaces, because the last thing I want is for these to go rusty in the box. Put those away and we're done. Thanks for watching, and we'll come back to this on Saturday. Today's Thursday, so we'll come back to this Saturday and we'll start correcting my deliberate mistake before we start gluing up. Thanks for watching. Bye.